Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you my interview with Naoki Yoshida while I've been visiting here in Japan for JP FanFest. The day after FanFest ended, Square Enix arranged for me to get about an hour interview with Yoshida, and it was great. I got to ask exactly the questions that I wanted to ask, and I'm sure they're exactly the questions you would have wanted me to ask after this last weekend. He was very, very thorough with his answers. The first question alone took him 20 to 25 minutes to answer because he wanted to make sure he was 100% accurate in the way he described this. So if you want to just read the text version, it's in the description of the video. If you want to listen to my thoughts on some of the answers, then just keep watching. So the first question, the most obvious one, I couldn't have gotten away from asking. I'm sure he'll hear it a million times over the next few months, but I'll be one of those people. Many Western players were surprised when it was revealed that Hrothgar and Viera would not have both genders available, especially after the effort the team went through to provide more options with Mikote and Rogadin in 2.0. I know Highlanders also, we're not going to get into that. Why did the team decide to do two different races with one gender each instead of one race with both genders each? I find that asking questions in this manner instead of just demanding the other gender is usually a much better way of approaching an interview, because it's never a good idea to just like, give us the other gender. But I hope that this was a good enough way for me to convey the players', I guess, disdain, especially on the Western side of things. I've seen the Reddit threads and all that stuff. And he gave me a very thorough answer. I do also have a follow-up question in regards to this. So first, he went back to explaining, why they added genders before. The timing of the game launch with A Realm Reborn, the races needed to have each gender counterpart for A Realm Reborn. So when he took over, he wanted to fill the missing genders to make those races seem complete. Which, what's different now compared to then is that after multiple expansions, it's just things aren't the same. So he apologized that it was going to be a very long answer because he needs to kind of describe how the development for the game has changed from when they were trying to, revive it for A Realm Reborn versus, 6 years later after it's already come out. So the game launched, 6 years ago. It's got tens of thousands of armor. And this is something that we totally expected would be a big reason why we didn't expect another race. Why people just expected male Viera, even with the thing that happened with the French client a while back, teasing that Hrothgar was going to be a thing. We weren't sure if it was cut content or leaked content because adding another race was going to be even tougher. So they need to make sure every race can use every outfit correctly. The more unique the appearance of the race, the more difficult these adjustments are to make. So they create one gear and have to make it fit all the different races. So when they add new races, they have to adjust how they actually approach that, because now they need to regulate their workflow so that there's even more work being done on every piece of armor, but it's being done at the same speed. So that way they can keep their patch schedule and make sure that things aren't too rough. Development costs for making a new race because of this is very intense because of how much work goes into things like that in the graphics of the game. So we also have to make sure these things all work properly. That's why we're saying that these may be the last races, because of just how taxing it is on the development team. So they wanted to give players options and freedom to choose more races. They envisioned adding a new race of their own, but people really wanted to play Viera. So if they added a race that wasn't Viera, which is why I kind of got to reword this part, people might wonder, why didn't you do Viera? So we had to add those for certain. There's not a biff discussion, a big discussion. Back when they added Al-Ra and Heavensward, why should they do Al-Ra? Because people were saying Viera, and they did Al-Ra instead. But a part of it was they knew they only had female Viera for reference. They had no idea what to do for the male variant. They'd have to kind of use their imagination, and there was a bit of fear. What if their interpretation of a male Viera the players didn't like because they were just used to the female ones. I guess they kind of imagine it maybe like an Elysin's body, with I guess a more Mikote style face, and you just slap bunny ears on top of them. He's like, would this really be the right way to add male Viera into the game? So that's why they did Al-Ra back in Heavensward. They could create something, without needing to focus so much on a reference point, and they could still create two very different types of characters. We've seen the slender female Al-Ra and the beefier male Al-Ra, which is how they did them way back when. So within a fantasy game like this one, especially 14, they need to have a good variety of races, and they do have a good variety of races. They need to consider, how many cute or sweet looking characters they have, and so they have quite a few. A lot of people love the appearance, and they find it very cute or sweet looking for some of the races right now. And then in Final Fantasy 14, they also need to make sure they have symbols of power, and they do. The Highlanders, the Rogadins, but they wanted something a little more animal-like. It's not that they wanted to create like a Wild West where there's just all these crazy numbers of characters, but it needs to be a good variety. So the simple answer to all of this, after explaining, what their process was, why they went the direction they did, Viera was sought after. They had to add them. But to expand the game and its options, they also wanted to add Hrothgar. Now, I, of course, made sure I had a follow-up question to this. The question I said that I wasn't going to ask really directly, but I did, kind of. And the follow-up question was, is the team considering adding the other gender? I think that's really the answer people wanted out of that first question. But understanding why they went the direction they did, and getting a little more clarity on it is very much appreciated. Yoshida took a very long time to make sure that he was very clear about why the team took the route that they did. So the short answer is they can't say that now. I mean, we know they can't say that now. A big reason is that they need to optimize workflow with the new ones and the existing races for Shadowbringers, because now, even though they're just adding 2 new races, the entire process has to change to be more efficient. After that, maybe they'll do the other gender, but they don't know. In fact, I meant to type that here, but we don't know right now. Okay, there we go. Got it. They did consider adding male Viera instead of Hrothgar. But, obviously we took the reasons about male Viera earlier, which was the same hang-up they had back at Heavensward. But they also noticed that a lot of players were asking for something that was more beast-like, on top of the fact that people were like, well, we want Viera, we want a race that's more beast-like. So there was a lot of demands, basically. He said they absolutely expected players to have very strong and passionate feedback about this gender locking thing. It was a really tough decision, but they really wanted to meet both the player feedback and the development team's vision going forward. It, again, is very costly to add a new race or new gender, so he won't say no to the remaining genders, but he very clearly wants to not set expectations high. He doesn't want you for the next 2 years going, oh yeah, he said he didn't say no, we're gonna get. He's like, just I won't promise this to you guys. I won't tell you that it's coming. It's something that we'll never say no to, but we're not going to say yes to outright either. And that's fairly normal. Yoshida tends to do that with quite a few features because he doesn't want to deny the players something unless it's something that they're very sure they won't add. So this is kind of the expectation, but I'm glad he kind of said, don't set your expectations high in regards to receiving the other gender. It's a lot clearer than just saying not at the current time, but that it's definitely always up for consideration. He then took the time to ask me a question. He said they haven't had time to look at all the feedback. They just got back from Tokyo Fan Festival. It's the first day back in the office. So he asked me what the general. He specifically asked about NA, but I kind of. I just answered it. I'm not sure what all the Western feedback has been, Europe and other areas as well. He specifically asked, were they upset about no male Viera, no female Hrothgar, or both? And I said, it's been a heated topic. Some players are okay with it. They don't mind. Like me, I wasn't planning on changing to a new race anyway. So, it's hard for me to be bothered by it. So I just have to be understanding for the players who are disappointed. But many players are upset about the gender locking. And I said, while many are disappointed about no male Viera because they were really expecting it, the no female Hrothgar, I've seen even more people be upset, I think, than the no male Viera. It's because on the first shard, they're called Ronsos. And in Final Fantasy X, there's plenty of female Ronsos. It's not like Viera where, some people were arguing, well, there's never been a male Viera, so why would they do it now? Where, as much as lore is not usually a reason to stop them from doing something, at least there was some players already had no expectations there. So they were just like, I was right. And I was wrong, by the way. But with Ronso, totally different because of the reference point. And he thanked me for that. He said they're putting together feedback and they're definitely considering an official forum post regarding all of this. So be on the lookout for that. I just appreciate the very thorough answer that he went through. Again, this took 20 to 25 minutes between him speaking, translating, asking for my feedback, replying to that. So I was just really appreciative of how thorough he was with this question. The next question, I was also very appreciative because he was also incredibly thorough with this, and good because these are the two questions I think we all really wanted answers to more than anything else. The reveal that Dancer is a ranged DPS caught a lot of players by surprise. I mean, even on stage, he said many players thought this would be a healer. Why did the team decide to add another DPS to the game as opposed to a healer? Now, I specifically didn't want to ask, why is Dancer not a healer? I asked why did they decide to add a DPS instead of a healer? Not trying to change what Dancer would be. And he asked it. He's like, why was the community generally expecting Dancer to be a healer if we ever added it? And I said, mostly because we just kind of didn't expect another DPS because we just got 2 DPS on the last expansion. Everyone kind of just expected, hey, we are absolutely getting a tank and a healer this expansion. So they just kind of said, well, if Dancer is the other job, then it's got to be a healer. And he said, simply put, they only had 2 physical range, so they wanted to add another one. They got 4 tanks and 4 melee. They got 3 casters, 3 healers, and yet there's only 2 ranged DPS for, Bard and Machinist. So they wanted to balance the number of jobs across the board, which I've seen plenty of players saying, that they were pretty sure that's why he was doing it too. I personally am more of the number of DPS versus the number of tanks versus the number of healers. I don't look at it the same way, but that is their reason. He also got into another reason of why they wanted to add a 4th tank. Why not add a 4th healer, but add a 4th tank. And he's answered this in interviews over the past several months, where he said with 4 tanks, they can better balance a tank role with 2 main tanks and 2 off tanks. Now, when he first made that comment a few months back, I was unsure, because I wasn't sure how the development team looked at what is a main tank, what is an off tank. When I think of the class fantasy behind Paladin, the staunch defender, the get behind me kind of guy, to me that seems like it would be like a main tank. But functionally, the players always put Paladin in the off tank role. So I was really curious what the development team's insight was on this, and I actually got an answer to it. So when players decide which job or role to play, small differences in abilities make a huge difference. So he specifically said people like to take Paladin as an off tank, thanks to the abilities like cover and their opening aggro, meaning that it's not as strong as the other jobs. So Warrior and Dark Knight are just basically, you're either taking Warrior as a main tank or Dark Knight as a main tank. That's how people tend to look at it. Well, yes, you can have groups that do Warrior or Dark Knight. People have classifications for these jobs already, and that they kind of look to that. So it leaves one job usually gets left out of the equation, no matter what, even if the job is kind of like in an okay state. So it's unhealthy to have one role kind of have a job that is unanimously the go-to pick, and the other half of it there isn't. There's I have to do this or this. So it's tougher to make that decision. Now, everything wanted me to make sure the things I say from now on are hypothetical, not final. Please convey that this is not how it's going to be for sure. This is just hypotheticals and maybes, or that's what our ideas are. This is not final. So please just don't take this, verbatim. Hypothetically speaking, if they were to, Warrior is the go-to main tank, kind of like how Paladin's the go-to off tank. If they make that balance adjustment, and to be fair, Warrior is kind of already the go-to main tank, but it's just a hypothetical. Then, Paladin and Dark Knight are the 2 fighting for off tanks, so it's the same problem. But if they have 4 tanks, they have 2 and 2, players feel like they have a bit more freedom, a bit more options, and they can balance it a little bit better. He didn't say which jobs they were considering making a main tank, which ones they were considering making an off tank. He just said that it's more fair this way. So there's 2 jobs between main tank and 2 jobs between the off tank section. So again, it's very tentative. Please convey this is no indication of our final plans. This is just, he really wanted me to get that across. So I'm making sure I'm telling you guys as much as possible. Let's get back to the question. Why a DPS and not a healer? So he wanted to establish that to say, you know, why would we add for a tank and not add for a healer? That was kind of the whole point of that little section right there. And when looking at the history of our healing jobs in Final Fantasy XIV, making a balance between the three has been very tough. With 3, it's been tough. So with 4, it's probably going to get even worse. But so instead of doing this, they want to prioritize balancing them better in this expansion. Now, we've heard that before. We've heard, oh, we want to balance the healers better. But we heard the same thing about the tanks and Stormblood, that they were putting a priority on that. And it was their priority on that in 4.0, which, by the way, the tank balance has actually been pretty fine. And the healer balance has been okay, just White Mage has kind of needed some help. I think we all agree on in terms of everyone's exact perception. So with the focus on it in 4.0, we then got a new tank in 5.0 because they came to that conclusion that they needed a 4th one. So with this, now they're putting that same priority on healing, and that's why they didn't add a new one in 4.0 and 5.0. This last part right here, I was, excuse me, by the way, I don't know what happened. This last part right here, the part I wanted to hear most. They really need to just completely restructure the way healers are even just handled as a whole in Final Fantasy XIV. They cannot keep the strict division between pure healer and barrier healer. It just doesn't work. Something needs to change so they can maintain good balance, and that's the main reason they don't have a healer. Priority is add 3rd range, add 4th tank, and then balance the healers better. So I told him this myself. I think players are actually, excuse me, pretty happy to hear that they want to just restructure, you know, just because that's the way it is. White Mage was the original pure healer, Scholar was the barrier healer, and Astro can do both. But he mentioned how, like, the jobs have other things that identify them. The fact that they are identified just as pure healer and barrier healer it's just not good for the health of the game, especially with only 3 healers. You know, 3 healers fitting in 2 roles, it's the same problem. So, and one of them can do both. So with Astro being able to choose between these two, there's other things they could do theoretically, but with the way our game is structured out, they'd have to fall into those 2 categories. So adding another one when one can do both, one can only do one and the other can only do one. And to be fair, the way that we handle the game nowadays with off global cooldown healing versus, you know, direct global cooldown healing is very different anyway. So I'm glad he's acknowledging that destroying or not destroying, but restructuring the way those niches are handled by the players and in the game itself is a priority, because there are types of healers that they could do, but with the way our game is, they'd have to fall into those 2 categories. So I was really happy to hear that. And people have been asking what job changes I want to see the most. And while, yes, I have Monk, I'm curious how Dancer is going to play. I think healer is the one we all have to look out for. Now that there is no healer in the expansion, that has to be the role that gets the most attention. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we learn in May from the live letter about the job changes. So I can't wait. He also said that in the future, for like fan festivals and job announcements, maybe they need to change the way they present things. And I think this is an accurate take. When they leave a lot of questions where they say like, oh, you know, oh, we're gonna, you know, there's a new job. I don't know. What could it be? What role could it be? Maybe they shouldn't do that as much. He said maybe like at a fan fest they say, hey, we are adding another job. And while we won't tell you what the job is, we'll tell you it's a tank. We'll tell you it's a healer. So players don't then spend months going, oh, the new job is probably this and it's this role. They know the role, and then they try to guess what the job is for the next several months. That way it subverts expectations and prevents people from doing that. And I honestly feel the same way about the way that Hrothgar was kind of handled, where everyone's interviewing him. Are we getting Nail Vieira? You know, there's still another fan fest. Are you planning on that? He goes, you're right, there is another fan fest. You know, which isn't indicative of a male Vieira. It's just we all, with patterns that have been established, plus, you know, that sort of, oh yeah, maybe, you know, maybe just wait till the next fan. People just create expectations over months and they just get shattered, and it makes the player reaction a lot worse. So I'm glad to see that they're kind of looking at that approach and maybe going, maybe we shouldn't leave that kind of mystery and at least give people like a baseline amount of information. So that way they're like, oh, we are adding a new race that will be male only, and Vieira will be female only. I say that probably would have been a better way to handle it, to just say outright, okay, Vieira are female only because of the way it's been in the past Final Fantasies. So I'm glad to see they're kind of looking at that structure. And you might be wondering how 3 questions took this long to get through in this video, and it's because this is about how long it took to get through the actual interview itself. The rest of my questions, honestly, were just trying to dig for a little bit more feedback they've received on stuff like Eureka and Blue Mage, as well as asking a few basic questions. One I'm very curious about, Eden was revealed as the new high-end raid, our new 8-player raid. And I don't know about you guys, but I saw it and I was maybe like, I think I'm going to like this, because it looked like it had a lot to do with the main story. You know, we're going to the first shard to restore, you know, the balance between light and dark. But in Eden, it said that we're going there to return all the elements, you know, fire, earth, wind, to, you know, try and fix the world. So normally the raids aren't involved with the main scenario at all. I guess outside of the coils when involved with the 1.0 main scenario. But Eden looks as if it's pretty important when it comes to you know, fixing what we're doing, what we're going there to do. So I tried to find out, you know, is Eden, does it have more relation to the main scenario than previous raids? I wasn't trying to ask if it was a main, like if they were putting the raid in the main scenario. I did kind of want to know that, but that's not what I was asking. But he was like, I can't answer that. That's a spoiler question. If I answer that now, players are going to be upset that I spoiled, you know, what the point of it is. We have experienced concerns or curiosity about Eden and its involvement in the main scenario. Will it be a part of the main scenario? So he actually just kind of started answering it as if that was the exact question. And which is good, because I actually did want to know that, but I didn't want to outright ask it. He said he won't comment on how closely it's involved with the main scenario quest, but he does want to say that he personally feels that, you know, now that they have a normal mode and a savage mode, that, you know, if they ever wanted to put a raid in the main scenario, they have this normal mode that people shouldn't have much concern getting through, because it's not that difficult. So, the fact that he I have the same outlook, you know, I've ever since we got normal mode raids back in Heavensward, I'm like, why don't we just make the raid part of the main scenario quest? And I get that there's people who, I guess they want to experience the story as close to solo as possible. So the 8-player raids being in there, you know, might take them a little bit out of their comfort zone. I guess I'm just on the side that that's okay. You know, I kind of like when stories do that. Being always comfortable with what I'm experiencing, what I'm doing, is not very exciting to me. So having that sort of, I guess, involvement, for me, it adds more weight to the raid and adds more weight to the story at the same time. So I kind of hope that Eden does take that approach. And it seems like Yoshi P's okay with the idea of a raid being in the main scenario at the very least, even if Eden won't be, because we don't know, he wouldn't answer that directly. So I'm glad to see that we share that belief at the very least. Now, next thing I asked about was Eureka. So first of all, he did ask me to congratulate everyone involved in the World First, you know, the Elysium members, the people who helped out. So, you know, we confirmed it. We weren't sure if we were World First. We were pretty sure, but like now we're 100% sure, because he asked me to thank the members of Elysium and the other people in the team who were, you know, joining Elysium to congratulate them. So I asked, you know, Eureka's gotten a lot of feedback. Baldesion Arsenal in particular has been a very big focus of player feedback. So with the confirmation of a new exploration zone in Shadowbringers, you know, what kind of changes are they thinking of making for public dungeons? You know, obviously they've gotten the feedback about the portals, about the reward structure for the support fate, and about the arsenal itself. I personally was satisfied with what was inside the arsenal, just not the way that the support fate, you know, we had to rely on people who really didn't have as much of an investment to help us, especially because, you know, the way the entry was handled with the portals, it was all sorts of, you know, there was all sorts of problems. And you know, of course, he's like, of course we're going to make adjustments. You know, they can't say exactly what the adjustments are going to be yet. And obviously I didn't need to know the exact things that they were going to do. But they are looking at the feedback. The reason I don't want to say anything too concrete is not only is it a large variety of feedback, the region of different regions of the world, the feedback is very different. So they can't just say, oh, well, North America says this, so let's do this, or Japan says this, let's do this, or Europe says this, so let's do this. They have to look at all of them and kind of, I guess, Venn diagram them and find what are the most important overlapping points that all the players have feedback about, and then what is the actual feedback about it, the portals and whatnot. So he wouldn't say anything concrete, but he wanted to make sure I conveyed that for the feedback they've received from the Arsenal is being very heavily considered and looked into in very great detail for exploration content that may come in the future. Another thing about Eureka is the fact that it was our source of the relic weapon. It changed the way we had worked on powerful weapons, such as the Zodiac and the Anima. Instead of doing old content, the team created something brand new. I asked it, what was the general feedback? And that's what I like to ask for, is feedback, because then once I know what the feedback is, he usually tells me how they're applying the feedback, or how they're taking it into consideration. So I asked it, has the team considered if they're going to be doing it in exploration content again, or if they're going to go back to the old way? And he said that, once again, the opinions here are pretty split. Some players are okay with Eureka or liked Eureka, and then you have a lot of players who are like, no, we want to go back to the Anima weapon and the Zodiac weapons. So the way we allow players to enhance a weapon is still actually undecided at this point. The development team but he just wanted to note the development team was pretty bored with the Zodiac and Anima weapons. It was just the same thing. They didn't have to do much. They just had to basically put some text in, decide what old content and how people were going to do it would be, and that they were just kind of bored with it. So they wanted to do something different with Eureka. They were surprised how many players actually liked that old system. How many people were like, yeah, we should go back to the old one. So they're pretty torn. They don't know which way they want to do it yet. So by the time we got to question number 7, I'm kind of just looking for some more basic answers to stuff at this point. The release date for the Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy XV collaboration was revealed, I said yesterday, it was revealed at the event. And players noticed that it's a limited time event. It's only around for about 5-6 weeks. So how does the team decide which collaborations are limited and which ones are permanent? Again, just asking outright, why is this one not permanent? I figure this is a little bit easier of a way to get an idea as to why they would design something a certain way. So it's actually decided based on the type of content they're making for the event itself. Like for the Garo, it's very simple. For the Garo event, which is permanent, it's simple. You just kind of integrate it into the PvP, and then it's new armor that's available. There's no real reason for that to be a limited time thing. For Monster Hunter, the content can be a lot more challenging for some players, and they might have difficulty obtaining it if they put a time limit on it. So they decided to make it permanently available. It's also a brand new type of content for them, so it's something that they want to keep around. A lot of resources went into it. For the Final Fantasy XV collaboration, it's catered to an easier difficulty, so it really doesn't need to be that permanent. During the live letter, it was said that while you're not guaranteed to get things, like just after completing it the first time, you're also not going to have to do anything crazy like farm 400 fates, basically referencing Yokai Watch and saying it's not going to be nearly as severe as that. And they also said, luckily, with a limited time event, they can always turn it back on if they really need to. So the idea is they don't really sit there and say, oh, how long will this be around? Do we really have to decide, is this limited or permanent? Because realistically, they could just turn them back on. They also haven't done that for many of the events over the years. They did the Lightning Returns one a handful of times, but then, it's not like they brought it back since in like the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm curious if they'll ever consider rotating through some of those other limited time collaborations, just bring them back just for the sake of having them. But we do know that with collaboration related stuff, if they usually just eventually put the rewards on the MOG station, so players who want them later have at least some means of activating them. So realistically, it was just, the content's not like crazy, super difficult. It's not going to be insanely hard for people to earn the rewards. So it doesn't really need to be permanent. So that was what the answer I got for that was. And this was the last question I had time for. Like I said, I cut out a few kind of, I guess, lore related questions. So I kind of ended up with some other stuff that was kind of more related to 4.5. But I wanted to know how they were shaping their decisions for the future. That was kind of like the theme of my interview. And, And so for my final question, I said, for Blue Mage, wait, there we go. I skipped the actual question. What has the general feedback been for Blue Mage and the concept of limited jobs? Has the feedback led the team to strive to make any changes towards their approach on how to implement this kind of content? I mean, it's been a really heated debate. I mean, I got a Blue Mage coaster from AORC Cafe. But, Blue Mage has been pretty heated. Some people were okay with it. Some people would have just made some changes. And some people are outright furious. But he said for Blue Mage, it's actually still only available at an entry level. So it's pretty easy to level. And, there's only very basic content available for it. They're going to eventually increase the level cap and then release new content for it. And then when they increase the level cap of Blue Mage, they'll have more content. And they said some of which is pretty hardcore. So this will release sometime after Shadowbringers releases. They want to see how players respond to these new types of content. When they reach that point, then they'll kind of see, okay, now that we've given them a lot more content, they've seen the whole scope of what Blue Mage is, then we can kind of decide, okay, what's the future of limited jobs? So they just don't want to talk about the future limited jobs at this point, just because Blue Mage isn't even fully implemented yet. They want to see the player feedback on more Blue Mage content. And I kind of do want to see, like, oh, they said that, the carnival right now is very basic, so players can get used to it, or, there's only a few spells. I think they said they in total have developed 119 spells, or at least they had at the point where they revealed Blue Mage, and we only have, 50 right now, so less than half of them. And then there's also questions, will we be able to take it into Palace of the Dead with pre-mades? Will we be able to try and solo to floor 200 with Blue Mage? Because I think that's a perfect playground. These are things we kind of really want to see. Harder carnivals, more difficult achievements and challenges, and all sorts of stuff like that. So I do kind of agree, but I feel as though there's still an initial feedback, to Blue Mage and its implementation, but they want to finish it. They want to see it all the way through. I guess, you kind of look at Eureka almost in the same vein. Eureka started off pretty split. Pagos got some incredibly negative feedback, and Pyros and Hydatos were, in general, improved over the previous two zones with the feedback they received. So going all the way through it and then getting to the end, by the time we got to the end of Eureka, I was like, okay, obviously things aren't perfect, but by the end of it, I'll say I had fun. At the very least, through the headaches and through the concerns. So with Blue Mage, if at the end of it all, even if it's not a full job, people still, enough people enjoyed it, have fun, and they can take in, a full scope of feedback, it'll help shape, if it is a future for limited jobs. Do they even bother doing another one? Or at the end of it all is player feedback like, no, don't do this anymore. So I'll wait to see it, but I was curious to see if that had affected the way they were going to approach limited jobs at all. For the last thing, I basically got told I had 2 or 3 minutes left. It wasn't really enough time for a question between translations and everything, so I just took the time to thank Yoshida. It meant a lot for me to come out to Japan, so I thanked him and the Square Enix Japan and, of course, Square Enix America for all working together to bring me out here. March is a very emotional time of year for me. I've said it a million times. You guys are probably sick of hearing it, but I lost my father this time approximately last year, so this month was, gonna be a tough one. So I really wanted them to understand that it meant a lot to me to be out here. Because I know my father would have been crazy proud, because he always talked about, when I go to Japan, make sure when you come back, tell me all about it. I'm telling my mom all about it. She was really excited. So I was very grateful. And he was very grateful back. He said, you're here because you work as hard as you do. You earn this, so enjoy it. And I appreciated that. And that was a wrap for my interview with Yoshida. And it was great. I was really happy with the first couple of answers we received. The rest of them weren't to me as important to get super in-depth answers, but I still got some good insight into the way that they're approaching certain other things going into 5.0. So let me know what you thought. Be sure to talk about it in the comment section of the video below. I did say on Twitter I had a couple of other surprises coming out of my visit to the Japan studios. I cannot reveal those yet, or I could, but I personally don't want to. They're things that in time you guys will just see. So I will wait. They're not NDAs. By the way, just to be clear, it's not like, new features for the game. It actually doesn't have anything to do with the game itself. So don't just subvert all those expectations. It's stuff on a personal level that relates to content that I'm going to be involved in. So be on the lookout for that. I'll probably be posting videos about the other stuff that I did while I was at Japan Studio. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And I've got more videos coming on JP Fan Fest, as well as podcasts and all that stuff. So just be on the lookout. It's going to be busy. We're going to be real busy for the next probably week or so, especially because I got to play Sekiro Chocobo Dungeon 4.56. We got a lot of stuff coming. So anyway, I will see all of you today, technically, because when I leave Japan on Tuesday and I land 9 a.m. on Tuesday, and then I'm going to stream. So I have to sleep on that plane. Looking forward to that. Not really. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, take care.